to the Burn Up Podcast, where we discuss all things agile software development and delivery.
We will be giving you an honest take on tools and techniques. We'll share our experiences, debunk myth, and hopefully provide needed inspiration.
Hi, I'm Todd Anderson, Consultant Delivery Manager. I've done just about every job in IT, from tech support, programmer, network security, project and program management. I can't say I've done everything, but I've seen a lot.
And I'm Marcel Bridge, digital consultant, business analyst and product owner. I've worked in digital before this even had a name, and since have been quite a bit around the block. And this is my way of giving back to the industry.
So sit back, relax, and settle in for this week's episode. Hey Marcel, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm very well, thank you.
All right, so it's been a while since we recorded an actual podcast on something. So
it has indeed.
Hopefully we have a good reason for that. So what have you been up to?
Well, I mean, the kind of most exciting thing I did recently was, it was actually over Christmas, so it's quite a while back. I was at my parents', and at some point I thought, there was this one thing I wanted to do for ages, which was basically summarize the use or create little recipes or little plays for a lot of the tools you and I and the teams are using regularly. Because I know that you know those tools and some of our colleagues, but not all of our clients and a lot of practitioners have heard of some of these things, but they're not necessarily using them or knowing how to use some of those tools we use to facilitate, to make our lives easier when we deliver. So I thought it would be nice just to write a couple of recipes or plays to help people work better.
Okay, so you've already previously written a playbook for inceptions, right?
So the Inception Playbook is a process of how you incept, how you kick off projects, right? But we don't go into the individual activities. We just say, in order to do this, you need to create a vision, or you need to story map, or you need to create a roadmap, or you need to prioritize. But we haven't talked about how you actually do these things.
So the mechanics of actually doing the
activities,
like the different mapping techniques and
correct.
And techniques. Okay,
correct.
Cool.
Because we assume the playbook for Inception gives you the big picture, and people who are using this are experienced practitioners and they know which tools. They just maybe want a little bit inspiration of how to fit the tools together. So I remember when we did the Inception in Dubai for one of our clients, you suggested that we do project sliders, right? Mm-hmm. I had never used this before, but you knew, and it did fit nicely into the Inception process. But I could have done with a playbook like this, where someone is like, okay, this is how project sliders work, and this is how you do them, and that's what this playbook kind of does.
So it's very practical advice on how to...
It is super practical. It's basically around 3 or 4 pages in quite big font for each of the tools, explaining you what the tool is, why to use it, what the benefits are, so what can you achieve with it, what does it help with, and then basically a step-by-step recipe, usually 6 or 7 steps of how to use the tool, and then a couple of what good looks like and tips and tricks. And we've also got template for each of those tools where a template is appropriate, and then also for every single of the tools we have the tool applied to a case study. So we're basically setting up a little coffee shop with Jack and Jill, who are our clients, and the playbook, the examples of the playbook take you through every single tool using that example. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to read that. That's not part of the playbook. The playbook is really just the recipe, and the rest is just supporting information if people want to know a little bit more.
And before we go into maybe a little bit more detail, like, so you call it the Core Tools Playbook, right? And it's free, right? Are you charging for it?
No. This is free. Good point. So this is totally free. In fact, it's made available under a Creative Commons attribution share alike license. So everyone can basically, as long as they give credit, they can do whatever they like with this. They can evolve it. They can use it. There are no copyright restrictions. I must say there is 1 or 2 tools in there which are copyright protected because obviously I didn't come up with all these tools, I'm just describing them. Yeah. So the value proposition canvas, for instance, is a bit more intellectually copyright protected by the creator's strategizer. So that's one reason, for instance, why there is no template for the value proposition canvas in my playbook, but you can get it from their website. But apart from that, everyone can do whatever they like with that. Tools Playbook is totally open, and it's called Core Tools Playbook because I had to restrict, just in terms of time, my writing to 18 tools. And they're the tools that I, as a business analyst or product owner, use mostly in my day-to-day work, and they cover a good part of the project lifecycle, if you like. But I'm working with a couple of colleagues at the moment to extend that, and we hope that maybe in 3 or 4 months' time we have another 20 tools on top of that.
Can you give us some detail about what the content of the playbook is, what's the kind of layout, how people should use it?
Yeah. So basically, it's got 18 tools in there, the ones I use mostly, and they cover the big part of the project lifecycle. So we start with a template or a suggestion of how to define a project vision or product vision. We then look a little bit around what are the drivers that affect strategy and that may have led to the creation of that vision. We then look at project constraints, where we use a tool called project sliders. Then we do a bit of organizational modeling. We look at business model canvas and context modeling. We then look at users and stakeholders. We look at stakeholder matrices and stakeholder onion. I'm also proposing a dependency map to identify and manage dependencies. And of course, we look at how we can express user needs, features, how we can prioritize them. So we're looking at things like the value proposition canvas, experience maps, road mapping, story mapping. There's a very short play around epics and user stories. And then finally, there are slightly more strategic tools around how we create a maturity model, how we can make build and buy decisions using a Wardley map, and how we can make better decisions by using a decision framework and how that could look like. The tools are very much in isolation in the playbook, so you can just read a single one and that's fine. Or they are also arranged in a suggested sequence or order by which you could incept or kick off a project or a product and take it from an idea to having something quite solid to then start delivering or developing on from. So there's a little bit of some overlap with the Inception playbook. And as I said, it's 3 or 4 pages maximum per tool, and then there are these templates which you can use to digitize some of the information you will capture during the use of the tools. And then of course this example scenario where we have Jack and Jill building up their little coffee business, and where we play through every single example.
Oh, that's cool. And so you mentioned the templates. So you actually have templates that people can download and
yes,
and use in the workshops.
Yes, they're made available in this case on Google Drive as Google Draw documents and Google Sheets, and you can just download them and do whatever you need to do with them.
So you can find this by going to the burnoutmedia.com website, and at the top there's a playbooks link, and it has a link both to this core tools and your original Inception playbook as well.
Yeah, and they're both, as you said, they're available for free download. I mean, we'd hear from everyone if you think this is helpful or useful. Please do feedback, and if you want to contribute, but you can just download it and do whatever.
Cool. So who do you think this is for? Is it who's your target audience for this specifically? Or?
Okay, it's definitely for practitioners who are maybe a bit more junior and are just trying to figure out what tools are there, and if there are tools that they find interesting or helpful, they can read a little bit more about them. So they may have a certain problem, maybe to prioritize features, and then they can look at the playbook, and the playbook will tell them that story mapping is a good exercise for that. And then if they don't know what story mapping is, these practitioners can then look through the recipe and kind of learn how to use the tool. I think it's also very good for more experienced practitioners who just want a step-by-step description, because maybe you're running a workshop and you just need to explain to your participants in the workshop of how a certain exercise you will do with them is done, and then you can just use that as your recipe, and you could just project it project it and read that to the people in the room, and that would work as well. Also, the templates and the examples help with that as well. And then finally, I think it's maybe also for more seasoned practitioners like yourself, for instance. You might look through this and you might say, oh wow, there's a really cool tool for project delivery that I've just not heard or seen about before, and that might inspire you. And then you can just quickly flick through it. Shouldn't take you more than 2 or 3 minutes to read through one of those, and you can decide whether it's interesting or not.
Yeah, I mean, in my current role, I do some coaching or at least signposting people to these kind of materials. So I think it might be useful when you're identifying those gaps in somebody's skill set, or you sort of they say they have this particular problem. That light bulb can kind of go off and say, well, hey, I can point them at this as a place to start. It might not be the end all be all or the end of the conversation, but at least is a place for them to start, right?
I think this is a really good point you just made. I've used this strongly with my last 2 clients, where either we had individual colleagues or mostly on the client side who didn't know some of the tools. And you can then, as you say, just pinpoint them to the playbook and say, look at page 20, this is, you have a look here. or if you are more kind of into building internal capabilities and you're upskilling or mentoring colleagues, you can use that as a guide, basically.
So one thing, sometimes you see like people that are like sort of academically smart about something where they've read about, like,
yes,
for instance, like they might have read your Core Tools Playbook and read about story mapping, but they never actually done it. And I think there's a wide chasm between somebody who's actually read about something and understands fundamentally what it's about versus somebody who's actually been in the heat of the moment, actually running a workshop and actually applying that to something. What are your thoughts on that? And like, how do you go from, what is your suggestion to be able to get experience actually doing these things rather than just reading them?
Okay, this is a very good point. So this playbook is very much practically applied. So I have one tool in there, for instance, experience mapping, where in my case I was writing like 3 pages. There is an entire 120-page book alone on experience mapping. So that book gives you the theory and all the details and lots of examples. What I have here is more like a cooking recipe. To get the experience, this is a good starting point because it gives you step-by-step instructions, and then also a couple of tips and tricks of what to watch out for, what to do, what to not do. But I think to really become a seasoned practitioner, I think there's 2 things needed, and I think you would agree with this, I hope, is that A, it's really good to participate and watch someone who has done this many times before. And then the next thing is maybe to do it yourself with support of someone who's experienced. And then just doing it, right? It's all about the experience, and maybe it's a bit harder at the beginning, and then over time you find this becomes easier and easier. But I don't know, in your experience, would you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing I'd say to that is that for people who either don't have access to a more experienced person to get that training or that sort of knowledge share.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't want to excurge anybody from actually trying it. Like, actually, like, sort of maybe in a safer space, actually just trying like story mapping. Like, if they're not, if they're stuck on a team or something like that, and they feel like story mapping is the thing that's the right tool for the job, and they don't really have access to a mentor or someone more experienced, they should still just try it, right?
Absolutely.
They should still, even if they fail or, it's still worth trying things.
I mean, none of these tools are particularly difficult to use. The difficulty is not in using, the step-by-step instructions are extremely simple for all of them. What makes it difficult is if you have very complex scenarios, but to your point, maybe you start in a safer environment with a slightly less complex project, and you work from there. And definitely, yes, just try it. Just get going, and you'll see the benefits, and you will get into these things.
And I think another thing that comes with experience is that although you're really clear about step by step how to do it, I think more experienced people will sort of recognize when to go off piste and sort of modify. Like you might, like, again, story mapping or something like that. You might sort of modify it a little bit to fit the need of the particular problem you're trying to solve, right?
I think this is super important to be aware that this is a starting point and it's a suggestion, and you always need to tailor to context. So for people who are reading this playbook, they will see that I have taken the liberty to modify some of the models that were out there already. And I said, this is how it's normally used, but I suggest we use it slightly differently. And again, yes, the more experience you get, the more you will fine-tune this, and you may skip entire steps, or you will turn the templates I'm suggesting totally around. And that is the beauty of this. This is not a static thing that people have to follow. This is an inspiration or a guide as a starting point, and then you go from there and you do whatever works for you, for your team, and for your problem.
Great. So just to wrap this up, so again, they can go to burnoutmedia.com, click on playbooks at the top, and they can pull down this Core Tools Playbook.
Yep.
And also the original Inception playbook, and then feedback to you if they have any questions.
Absolutely. We're there, or to you. I mean, if they, there are questions around what tools to use in our individual spaces, then definitely get in touch.
Awesome. That's it for today's episode. Have a look at our show notes with related information and details on how to get in touch at theburnup.com. We are listener driven, so please do send us your questions, comments, and ideas for new episodes.
We're both practitioners and are happy to discuss interesting opportunities from consulting to coaching to getting involved in actual projects. For inquiries, please visit burnupmedia.com. This podcast is produced by Burnup Media Limited under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 license, which means you can share it as long as you give credit, but you cannot change it or make money of it.
Until next time, thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.